Good morning. My name is Detective Donald Seaman, S-E-A-M-O-N.
And where are you employed?
I'm currently employed by the Geauga County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you worked there?
I've been in law enforcement for over 22 years. I was previously employed by the Lake County Sheriff's Office for about 15 years. I've been here at the Geauga County Sheriff's Office for about 8.
Now, are you familiar with the investigation into what's been known in the community as Geauga's Child?
I am.
Did you have any involvement in the case?
I did.
And when did you first become involved?
I had worked with the investigators for years, even at my previous employment. Was aware of the investigation when I came here to Geauga County and was assigned to the Detective Bureau. I learned from other investigators that were currently and had been investigating the case. I did review the case files. It's very extensive, as Chief Neas had stated earlier, or the other day. The efforts that they went to were truly amazing to try to bring this case to some type of conclusion. I did assist in some tips and leads that we had received, and we looked into those tips and leads. Unfortunately, those were not able to bring the case to any type of successful conclusion.
So did you take any different steps, anything that had not been tried yet?
I did. So in 2018, with the current advancements with DNA and genealogy, I looked into the possibility that we'd be able to use those new investigative tools in this case. I worked with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation and the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office, and we contacted a private lab that was recommended to me, Parabon Industries. We learned that it was possible that there was DNA in a tooth bud that was suitable for comparison for DNA and genealogy. At that time, I approached the administration, both the Sheriff's Office and the Prosecutor's Office, to see if they would back the use of this new investigative tool. And to their credit, I believe I had the approval that day and a check for the money to initiate the investigation.
Okay. And can you just briefly describe the overview of what you went about to get the DNA processed and sent to this lab?
So if a normal citizen would submit their DNA to one of the genealogy companies, you would get a kit, and it would take your saliva, you would send that in, that would turn that into a DNA kit, which would then be submitted to the online databases for comparison. We weren't able to do that with Geauga's Child, so we did take the DNA that was extracted from a tooth bud that was sent to a private lab to be able to be turned into that kit, which was then turned into the genealogy sites and for comparison.
Now, based on your initial investigation into this type of technique, the use of DNA to get some leads, what were you hoping to get?
We were hoping that we would be able to identify close family members and to be able to bring that case to some type of resolution.
Okay. And what did you end up receiving from the lab after you submitted the child's DNA?
So the initial results that we received, they stated that there was not enough close family members at that time that were identified to proceed with the investigation. They recommended either we wait and see if additional citizens would submit their DNA for comparison, or they did say that we could on our own try to work with the online databases and establish a family tree. Once we establish a family tree, we could identify family members and collect their DNA, which then could be submitted and then helpful for them to assist us with the investigation.
Now, you mentioned online databases. What are you talking about specifically?
So there's one public database, or at that time, from what I understand, over the past 3 years, it's since changed. So I can only speak about when we used it from 2018 to 2019. It was a public database that people could choose to submit their DNA for comparison, so they could try to identify people in their family tree, and that database is called GEDmatch. There are other private sites such as Ancestry, 23andMe. The youngest child's DNA was not permitted to be submitted to those sites. They would not allow us to submit it to those sites.
Now, did you receive any potential matches when you got the results back from the lab?
We did. So I got a list of potential matches. At that time, GEDmatch did not require people that were submitting their DNA to provide accurate information like name, date of birth, address. All they were required to submit was a username and an email address. So basically we got a list of usernames and email addresses of potential matches. The closest match at that time was a third to fourth generation cousin. Again, we only had usernames and email addresses of those people.
Well, was there any match that you found useful?
There was. So we were able to also compare the different kits to each other. So we were able to establish that there was two distinct families. One of those families was originating out of Doddridge, West Virginia. The other side of the family appeared to be based out of Lebanon, and it was very difficult to find records going back to that country, Lebanon, and we had found that some of them were born in Lebanon and then adopted into other countries such as France and England. So we decided to, and we didn't know which parent was which, whether it was mother or father, but we decided to focus on the family side that was based out of Doddridge, West Virginia, because we could find more records on those ancestors. Specifically, there was a match that was submitted. It appeared to be submitted by a gentleman named Vern Holden, and he actually put a real name into the username, and that name was Peter David Gilger. And that was where we based our family tree off of that match, Peter David Gilger.
Okay, so how, when you say you base your family tree on that name, what steps did you take to build this family tree?
So we compared Peter David Gilger's DNA to the other matches and established other people that were on that side of the family, if you will. And then we used anything from census reports, obituaries, birth records, death records, anything open source to attempt to identify other family members in that family tree. We did actually contact Vern Holden, who was the person that submitted Peter David Gilger's DNA. He did confirm that he did submit that kit and that it was his father-in-law who grew up in Warren, Ohio. Vern Holden lived in Omaha, Nebraska at the time, and he still does. With his help, we were able to expand on that family tree, and eventually, over a period of 6 to 8 months, I would estimate, we were able to build a family tree of over 1,400 people.
And did you find this this technique, this investigative technique, to be useful in this case?
It was.
And how so?
It was something new to us. We had never done it before. So it took us, again, we were doing it on our own. We did not have the assistance of Parabon at that time. We would take that family tree and select individuals in the family tree, contact them, and ask them to submit their DNA for comparison. We found later that most of them, or not most, but some of them, had already submitted their DNA to the private sites, being Ancestry and 23andMe, and all but one of them were willing to put their DNA into the public site, being GEDmatch, so that we could compare it to that of Jaga's child and the other family members that we identified. So essentially we were able to take that 1,400 family tree, that ocean, and turn it into a pond of essentially we knew that the child was a grandchild of one of 10 siblings at the end of the investigation.
Now you mentioned that the whole family tree is about 1,400 people, correct?
It is.
And was this in a computer program?
It was. So this slide is of Peter David Gilger, who was basically ground zero where we started our family tree from this person. You can see Peter David Gilger and his daughter And the unknown Holden would be Vern Holden, who was the gentleman that assisted us with this investigation. And then you can see the ancestors of Peter David Gilger, his parents being Peter Dower Gilger and Catherine A. Phillips. And it just continues to go back until Oliver Gilger and Ellen Ash, which they were both born in 1857 and 1874. Actually identifies Peter Dower Gilger, who is the father of Peter David Gilger, who we started from. Again, he was born in 1904 in Doddridge, West Virginia. It shows his wife and his two siblings being Oliver Gilger and Nellie Gilger. And this is how we were able to go back and find that common ancestor between Peter David Gilger and Nicholas Hickman to start moving forward back down to where we could find the potential parents. So Rachel Ash would be an ancestor of Gail Ritchie. So you can see that Gail Ritchie also shares that same lineage, being Adam Ash and Eleanor Purnell as the other matches. So once we were able to identify that the descendant was under Rachel Ash, then we would just focus under that section and again collect DNA from family members, eliminating certain areas as we went.
You mentioned Adam Ash.
Right.
And Rachel Ash.
The common ancestors of all the matches in this family tree, the non-Lebanese side. In May of 2019, we were down to the child was a grandchild of one of three siblings. Only one of them was alive, and he was living in Lyndhurst, Ohio. His name was Harvey Bland. Harvey was adopted at a very young age and was adopted into the Eastwood family. And so his name at the time that we talked to him was Harvey Eastwood. He was approximately 80 years old in May of 19, and we decided to go speak to him at his residence in Lyndhurst, Ohio, to further eliminate this family tree.
And this, again, we see information on
Mr. Bland Eastwood.
So let's talk a little bit about your interview with Mr. Eastwood. Again, without going into what he told you, based upon the information that he provided you, what did you do?
Based on that, we spoke to Harvey for quite some time. Initially, he was not able to provide us any information that was useful. After about an hour, he did provide us information that made us believe that either his daughter Gail or her sister was in fact the mother of Jaga's child. At that time, we secured DNA from both Harvey and his wife Nancy, and that would have been in May of 2019.
And based upon the results of that DNA testing, what did you then do?
It took about 2 weeks for that testing to come back. During that time, we started working on the other side of the family tree that was based out of Lebanon. I was speaking with an individual who was born in Lebanon. Her name is Laurencia Goes. She was adopted at a very young age into England. And she had actually created a Facebook page for people born in Lebanon that were adopted, trying to find their true biological families. Ms. Goes did tell me that she was connected through DNA through one of the private sites with a Judith Ritchie Novak who lived in the United States. I was able to find Judith Ritchie Novak living in southern Ohio, so I made contact with her, and she told us that she was in fact connected through DNA to Laurencia Goes, and that Mark Ritchie was her first cousin. So we were at that time able to confirm that Mark Ritchie was related to the child, to Jaga's child, and that either Gail or her sister were the mother of Jaga's child, because the results came back from Harvey and his wife that they were the maternal grandparents. At the time we couldn't determine if Gail or her sister was the mother. We couldn't exclude her, so we obtained search warrants for all three. We split up. Several detectives, Sergeant Janovich and I, went to the home of the Ritchies in Euclid, Ohio. Detective McLaughlin and Detective Vilsack responded to Gail's sister's house in Akron. Detective Janovich and I waited outside the Ritchie residence. We got there about 7 o'clock in the morning. We did see Mark Ritchie leave for work. We did see what appeared to be one of their living sons stop by and visit for a while. At about 3 o'clock, Gail Ritchie did exit the home.
And did you speak to her then?
We did.
And was that interaction recorded?
It was. So I had a pocket recorder on, and Sergeant Janovich had a hidden video camera that was inside of a coffee cup.
Sheriff's Office. We just want to see who you talked to for a couple of minutes. Okay. So any idea what we want to talk to you about? Because I can't think you might.
Well, my parents said that you were at their house.
Mm-hmm. What do you think that's about?
It was about a baby.
Yeah. What about?
I did not know I was pregnant at the time. I still had my menstrual cycles. And then my menstrual cycles ended up stopping.
Okay.
I don't know how long they were. You need to know that. I don't know. I was at work. I was a nanny for a family in Shaker State. I was waiting for them to come home from school. I hadn't been feeling well at all that day. The next thing I knew, I was giving birth to a baby in the toilet. I didn't know what to do. We just hadn't gotten home from school yet. The only thing was baby had a bag. I had no idea what the sex was. I never looked at it. Out the car. Placed it in the trunk. Then I cleaned up the bathroom.
Was the baby still in the bag at that time? Or did you put it in something else?
But,
Like a garbage bag?
yes. I went on with the rest of the evening with the kids. And I went home.
Where were you living at the time?
With my parents. I was
In
still
Harwich?
yes. I wasn't sure what to do. No one knew. And then we had And I don't know the time frame from when to when, but camps that were associated with an aunt out here. I came out with our youth group for a weekend. But I didn't, I got in my car and left the camp for a while. I got in my car.
From camp coming in?
Yes.
And Joe sitting there as well?
Yes. I got in my car and just drove. I don't know where I ended up. And I just ended up stopping on a road. I don't know which road. And I took the bag out of the trunk. And I laid it in the woods. I didn't know what to do.
How far from the camp were you, remember?
I have no idea. I really don't know. I don't. Other than driving to the camp, I really don't.
At what point do you know that the baby was found? I mean, was it recently, was it a long time ago, or?
No, you were at my parents'
So that's the first time that you know that the baby was found?
The baby was found.
You know that the baby was born alive?
I don't remember. I don't recall it ever crying.
Okay. But it's not like it was stillborn or anything. I mean, the coroner's report shows that it actually was breathing.
Okay.
So, at some point, there had to be something kind of that you heard or saw, and the baby had to be moving, or...
It's possible. I don't remember. I remember picking it up and placing it in the bag.
Did it actually fall into the toilet when you gave birth?
Yes.
So everything just kind of fell into the toilet?
Yes.
Okay, not onto the floor or anything like that?
No.
Okay, so the baby was actually in the toilet?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Mr. Badger?
You have no questions of the detective. Thank you, Judge.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dr. Harshbarger, what do you do for a living?
I'm a board-certified forensic pathologist, and I currently am the elected official of Montgomery County Coroner, which is Dayton, Ohio.
How about your medical school training?
Sure. So after college, I attended Southern Illinois University School of Law from 90 to 92. From 92 to 96, I attended Southern Illinois University School of Medicine. In 96, I graduated with my law degree and my medical degree. It's technically a combined program, so when I started, I was designed to get both degrees. That was my medical education and law school.
And explain to us why a medical doctor would get a law degree?
Well, this was the mid-'80s when medicine was changing with a new thing called HMOs, and many doctors were not happy with potential futures of medicine, and I had an opportunity. The college I went to, their combined MD-JD program I was the second class, so essentially applying during the first class. I was smart enough to know that I went from an application pool of several hundred people for 70 slots to an application pool of 2, and we both got in. So one was potential job careers. I was, at the time, interested in forensic pathology. I started college with a minor in administration of justice. I was going to be a police officer, an Illinois State Trooper at the time. So finding forensic pathology, I knew that's a likely destination for me. So the law degree combined program made sense at the time. For career-wise, medicine changed, had another professional degree, and it combined with forensic pathology, at least from a knowledge sense.
And to deviate for a moment, has that law degree been instrumental in your service as a board-certified county coroner?
Yes, but I don't know, because I have it, I don't know the opposite side, and I've used it for teaching. I present medical evidence lectures to our prosecutor's office, other venues. I don't practice law. I don't pretend to practice law, but it does allow some greater familiarity, maybe, and knowledge of what is needed for the system.
Whether or not this was a live birth,
I have not been able to opine that.
why not?
So that's the long answer. Because the data available does not support using limited information, i.e. microscopic evaluation of the lungs, as a determinant or the sole determinant for live birth or evidence of essentially voluntary muscle movement, which the breathing is the marker that you were able to expand your chest. The only real markers of that are food in the stomach, although that can be faked as well. But if a child has eaten, then you know they can coordinate their muscles and swallow food. So breathing, having expanded alveoli microscopically, in my opinion, is useful data point, but it is unreliable when all the other markers we use or other markers we typically have available to us allow for greater confidence by doing that. So in my opinion, there's just not enough information on top of post-mortem changes that have occurred which prevent reliability from that microscopic evaluation as really the sole data point we have. And I think it's just too unreliable to make that conclusion. So an autopsy, I'm sure you've heard, is done with the external exam, internal exam, where the organs are evaluated. In this protocol, there are multiple areas of the body absent. And they are described, stomach, gastrointestinal, the colon, bowel, small bowel, pancreas, kidneys, adrenal gland, the left arm, right leg are all absent, ribs are missing, left lung is missing. So one of those described as absent is the adrenal glands. However, in the microscopic description section, there is a description of the adrenal glands in the microscopic. So it's internally inconsistent. It's possible that the tissue was found later, but it's internally inconsistent if the adrenal glands were absent, yet they're described microscopically. I believe this exhibit shows, particularly of the head, the leg, maybe the umbilical cord stump, the internal soft tissues of the chest. You see the muscle is a darker gray. That decomposition is occurring, which then gives you a source of gas production, which is a source of expansion of the alveoli artifactually. In my opinion, the ability to say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty just the air or the expansion of alveoli is a live birth.
So, before we even get to the act that the defendant took, the placing of this child in that garbage bag, we have to show that, in fact, the child was born alive. Obviously, if he was stillborn, no matter what action the defendant took, she wouldn't have caused his death. So, did the state present sufficient evidence for you to find beyond a reasonable doubt that the child was born alive? Yes. You'll have the autopsy report that was prepared by Dr. Challoner back in 1993. And based on his findings in that case, he determined that the child at issue was a full-term live born. and was concerned about. But in addition to that, there was no finding of infection or birth defects in any of the remaining organs that would have rendered this child stillborn or caused him to die soon after birth. Now it's true, you saw those pictures, this child was badly mutilated, missing limbs, missing multiple organs. But Dr. Philo testified that in order for a live birth to occur, you only need 3 organs: the brain, the heart, and the lungs. All 3 still were in the child's body when he was recovered. Now the brain had been reduced to basically a liquid mass at this point because of bacteria. But Dr. Philo testified he could still be certain that the brain would have supported life because there was no other findings about the skull and the brain area that would have shown that this brain would have been malformed or developed in a way as not to support life. And then we have the heart. No findings of abnormalities in the heart. It appeared to be healthy. And then the one remaining lung, same thing. No findings of abnormalities. It appeared to be a perfectly functioning lung. And based on the size of the infant, he appears to be a full term, and so he would have been able to survive on his own outside the womb. So taking that in findings of breathing into the child, it wasn't from bacteria, because he testified, and the defense expert agreed, this lung was very well preserved. No evidence of bacteria. That bacteria is, along with the, let me step back. The bacteria, if bacteria existed, that certainly could produce gases that would have caused the lung tissues to expand. And the bacteria and the only conclusion is that this is air that was breathed in by the infant, because they were non-distended, those spaces, indicating the child had breathed on his own. The distended portion, again, Dr. Philo testified that can happen either by bacteria, but again, we have no bacteria present, or someone performing CPR and forcing air into the lungs. Because we have no evidence of bacteria, that's got to be the only explanation here. But even absent that, we have, again, that 55-60% of the lung tissue that shows that the child breathed on his own. So the breathing on his own, combined with the fact that the child was otherwise a healthy baby boy, indicates this was a live birth. So then, did the defendant's actions cause his death? Well, Dr. Philo, I guess first of all, Dr. Challoner made the finding that the cause of death here was undetermined violent cause. And Dr. Philo's explanation of what that means is that they couldn't come up with an exact cause of death, but because this was a live child who was otherwise healthy, the only conclusion they could make is that some action caused an unnatural death. This child otherwise would have lived had someone not done something. And when posed with a hypothetical, if the child had been placed in a garbage bag and the garbage bag tied up, what would that have done to the child? Well, he would have suffocated. That's an act by someone else that unnaturally caused this child's death. Here we have evidence that was found nearby the child's body of a garbage bag that was torn open, that had blood in it, that later tested positive, or that matched the DNA of the child and the DNA of the defendant, Gail Ritchie. And we have her own statement to the police where she admitted that after giving birth, she took this child, placed him in a garbage bag, tied him up, which would have cut off his oxygen, and placed him in her trunk. Her actions caused the death of this child. So causation has been established. Now let's talk about purposely. Did she purposely cause the death of this child? Now, to act purposely is to act with the specific intent to cause a result. And it's a decision of the mind that, in order to prove it, you have to look at the acts that someone takes when they're acting under this mental state. You can also look at the statements that they make when they're interviewed. So, does the evidence establish that she purposely caused the death of the child? Well, taking an otherwise healthy baby boy and putting him in a garbage bag and tying the top closed, I mean, there's really no other conclusion you can come to than she intended to end his life. That is what's going to happen when you put not just a baby in a garbage bag, but any person you cut off oxygen. The only possible end here was that child was going to die. And so she did act purposely in doing so. Now we also have her statement to the officers to take a look at. And there are some inconsistencies here. Mainly that she is brought in about 2 weeks after the officers first approach her parents. So she's aware that this is being looked into. She's aware that officers are tracking down, took the parents' DNA. They're probably trying to identify who the mother of this child is. So she's got some time to put together an explanation of what happened. And when she's asked about what happened, she says she's in Shaker Heights as a nanny for this family. And while everyone's gone, the kids are at school, parents are at work, she gives birth in the bathroom. Births the child into the toilet. No one else is aware. No one else is around. Takes the child, puts him in a garbage bag, puts him in her trunk. When she's asked why did she do this? Why was she in this position where she didn't tell anyone? She didn't go and get any help. She discusses that, she was afraid that she would lose her then boyfriend at the time, now husband, the father of the child. She was concerned because her father had told her and her sister, don't ever have kids out of wedlock. So here she is, a pregnant woman, she's single, just afraid about the consequences of what was going to happen. Now, in jury selection, I asked all of you, and you all agreed that it would be wrong to make your decision in this case based upon sympathy. Either sympathy for the child because you saw those pictures and felt bad for what happened to the child and decided to vote guilty just because of the pictures. That would be wrong. But it would also be wrong to vote not guilty simply because you felt bad for the situation that the defendant was in. And it would be understandable to have sympathy for her. She's, again, young, unmarried, doesn't know what to do. She acted out of fear, presumably. But that acting out of fear doesn't negate the purpose element. I think a lot of times you hear someone is charged with murder and you think, that the defendant was angry at someone and just wanted to hurt that other person and end their life. And certainly that is a way to act purposely, with malice. But you can also act purposely out of fear. And again, if you believe the defendant's explanation of why she did this, that's why she was acting purposely. She was acting out of fear. She didn't know what to do. But again, she made the decision to put her child in a garbage bag, again, out of fear, but knowing that this was going to kill him. This was a purposeful act. even if you feel sympathy for the reasons behind it, she acted purposely. Now, the other part about purposely is that she would actually have to be aware that the child was born alive. And when she's asked about that in her interview, her response is, I don't know, I'm not sure. I don't remember whether or not the child was moving, if he was making noise or not. But you have to ask yourself, is that reasonable? She says in her interview that for a while she didn't know she was pregnant, but then for about 3 months she was aware. She didn't get any help from doctors. According to her, she didn't seek out any help from others to help her work through this. But she knew that at some point she was going to give birth. I mean, that's a deadline that's going to be coming up. And she's taken no steps to address what she's going to do when she gives birth. And so is it reasonable that she's not really going to pay that much attention to the status of the child once she births him? I will remind you that when she's asked about that retreat, she rattles off the names of the girls that she took to that retreat 26 years prior for a weekend retreat. That one she remembers, but was the child moving? Was he making noise? Well, I don't know. Why doesn't she remember? Because she doesn't want to say it. She doesn't want to admit. Now, Detective Seaman testified that he could only verify very basic things about her story. Obviously, she's the mother. We can show that from the DNA testing. She stuck the baby in a garbage bag because we found the garbage bag. And the baby was dumped in the woods because that's where we found the garbage bag. As far as the actual circumstances of what went down, whether it actually happened in Shaker Heights or if it happened somewhere else, we don't know. It's too late. It's 26 years later. We can't go back to the scene and get forensic evidence that her body fluids or the child's body fluids were in that bathroom, or that in the trunk of the car she had back then we would have found body fluids. It's just way too late. So going into this interview, she's got to be aware that we're going to know if she's the mother, and because we've recovered the body, she's going to know that we have the garbage bag. So she's got to admit to that stuff. Maybe it was her intent to say the child was stillborn, but up front, Detective Seaman indicates to her, this autopsy shows the child was born alive and was breathing. So that's out. So what can she do now? Well, the only thing she can do now is, because she's confronted with a statement from the detective that the child was born alive, she can't just straight out and say the child was stillborn. She's got to equivocate. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't really remember. But again, it's up to you to determine, is that reasonable? And we submit to you it is not. She remembers those other facts, the kids that she took to the retreat, but she doesn't remember this extremely important incident, giving birth to a child, and she doesn't remember, was he moving, was he breathing? That's because she does remember. The child was born alive, and she knows because she's being interrogated about his death. She's trying to give forth an explanation that will keep her out of as much trouble as possible. Now you might ask yourself, why didn't she tell the officers that she gave CPR to the child? Because Dr. Philo indicates that someone gave CPR to the child. Well, that's further evidence that the story that she's telling you is not true. Again, she's being questioned about this child, about his death. She knows that they're looking for who killed this child. If she had actually performed CPR on the child, you put that out there right away. This was a stillborn child. I tried to revive him. He wasn't moving. I breathed into his lungs. He didn't survive. She doesn't say that because she didn't do it. She's probably not even aware that someone else did. And again, this undercuts her story because someone else did perform CPR, but she says no one else was present. So basically, her whole story about the circumstances of this child, of the birth and the child's death, we can't take that for certain. The fact that someone breathed in this child's lungs and she never brings it up says it did not happen the way she says it happened. So we don't even know if it happened in Shaker Heights, or did it happen at the camp? Did it happen somewhere else? We don't know. But we do know someone else had to be present, because otherwise she would have claimed that she had tried to revive this boy. And again, if the child was actually stillborn and she had tried to revive him, up front, when the officers said, we know the child was born alive, you'd think she'd say, no, he wasn't. I tried to revive him. He was stillborn. But she doesn't say that. Instead, it's, I don't know. I don't remember. Why? Because the child was born alive and she killed him. And she knows that. And now she knows she's caught. And that's basically the planning in advance of what you're going to do. And now the judge is going to instruct you that this is not just a spur of the moment snap decision. There's got to be some thinking that's gone into the defendant's actions. It doesn't have to be a long time, but the evidence has to show that she thought this through and had this plan in place. So what is the evidence that she had the plan in place? Well, first of all, again, taking her at her word, she's aware that she's pregnant for about 3 months. Again, because there's inconsistencies, is that true or not? We don't know. But again, what does she do to prepare for the birth? Nothing. Doesn't go to the doctor, doesn't tell anyone, doesn't have anything in place for when she gives birth to this child. Again, leading up to this deadline, basically it appears her plan is to not do anything with the child, give birth to him, and we'll see what happens. And what do we see what happens? Is that she kills the child. She puts him in the garbage bag, which is further evidence of prior calculation and design. Because once she gives birth, it's not like she's sitting right there and immediately has a garbage bag next to her. She either had to go get that garbage bag before she gave birth, or after giving birth, she gets up and walks somewhere and grabs a garbage bag. Either one of those shows that this was planned out. She didn't just have one in her pocket because she carries one around with her. This was a plan that she put in place. There's your prior calculation and design.